the thing I keep coming back to, is how quiet she was when Drummond did it. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't pull her aside. He walked up to the assignment board in front of all 12 of us, took her name tag off the number 2 breech slot, and moved it to the observer column at the far right, the column nobody ever got assigned to because it didn't require a shooter, just a warm body with a radio and a clipboard. He said, loud enough for the room, "You're range safety on this one, not a shooter." Then he turned and briefed the rest of the team like she was already gone. She didn't argue. She picked up the clipboard from the table near the door. She found a spot along the wall and stood there with the rest of us and listened to the rest of the brief. I remember thinking Drummond was right. That's the part that matters. I was standing 2 feet from him, and I remember thinking he'd read her correctly, that she was support staff, logistics maybe, someone who'd been handed a slot on the compound's training rotation, because the paperwork said she was qualified and the paperwork was being generous. She was lean and quiet, and she had no unit patch on her left shoulder, just the blank Velcro field, and in a room full of men who'd been running CQB for years, that blank patch read like an answer. Drummond didn't even look at her when he moved the tag. That's how certain he was. That's how certain I was. Fob Callum Sector 9 was a 3-room urban block built into the far end of the live fire compound, concrete walls, steel frame doors, ambient light only, the kind of structure that punished the impatient and the slow in equal measure. The scenario was a standard hostage rescue problem. 2 OPFOR inside with 2 role players simulating non-combatants. Entry through a single threshold, time limit of 6 minutes before the evaluators called the scenario compromised. We'd run variations of it 24 times in the past month. Drummond's team had the compound record at 4 minutes and 11 seconds, set 8 weeks prior. Nobody had come close since. We staged at the threshold at 6:14. The light was flat and gray, the kind that comes off desert concrete before the sun clears the ridge, and the wind had pushed a thin layer of dust across the open ground between the TOC and the Sector 9 block. I was in the 3rd position in the stack, just behind Drummond and Kelso. She was 30 meters back at the observer post, clipboard in hand, radio on her hip. Drummond gave the go signal at 6:15. The first room went clean. Kelso made entry, I followed. Drummond came through behind, textbook tight, exactly the geometry we drilled. The second door was where it fell apart. The OPFOR in the scenario had been told to simulate a barricade, and whoever had designed the problem that morning had put both role players behind the second door in a configuration that created a hard crossfire angle from the far corner. We stacked. Drummond put his hand up. We froze. The problem with a crossfire angle in a room that size is that the first man through becomes a target for both vectors simultaneously. Drummond knew it. We all knew it. He cycled through the options in about 15 seconds, which is fast for a man running real math on a live problem, and came up with the same answer every time. Someone was going to take the angle, and whoever took it was going to eat it. He keyed the radio. TOC Drummond, we're holding at threshold 2, requesting evaluation pause. The TOC came back in about 4 seconds. It was Colonel Voss's voice, not the training officer's. Negative Drummond, scenario clock is running, find your solution. Drummond didn't respond right away. I could see his jaw working. He looked at Kelso, then at me, then at the door. That was when her voice came over the net. TOC, Observer Callum 6. I can take the second room. Request permission to enter. There was a pause. Then Drummond's voice, flat and hard. Negative, you're on observer status. Stay at the post. Another pause. Then Colonel Voss, Callum 6, this is Voss. You're cleared to enter. Drummond, hold the threshold. I felt Drummond go still beside me in a way I hadn't felt before. Not angry. Something more careful than that, like a man who has just realized he may have made a calculation error and is not sure yet how large it is. She moved past us without saying anything. I turned to watch her come through the first room, and I registered 2 things almost simultaneously. She had set the clipboard down somewhere, and was moving with a rifle that had been slung at her back the entire brief, and she moved through the door frame the way water moves through a gap. Not fast exactly, but without any wasted motion at all, like every degree of angle had been decided before she arrived at it. I lost visual when she crossed the threshold of the second room. What I had was the helmet cam feed on the TOC monitor, visible through the open doorway 20 meters behind us. I could see the screen from where I stood at the threshold. I watched it because there was nothing else to do, and because Drummond was watching it too, and because neither of us spoke. The second room took 41 seconds. I know because the timestamp was on the feed. Both OPFOR threats were down, controlled, sequenced. The crossfire angle taken from a low entry position that split the vector and gave her a clean line on both before either could establish a bead. The two role players were against the far wall, unharmed, hands visible. She didn't stop to check them. She moved directly to the third door. The third room took 53 seconds. Total time from threshold to entry to all clear call, 3 minutes and 51 seconds. She brought both role players out through the first room and handed them off to the scenario staff at the exterior threshold. Then she cleared her weapon, set the rifle to safe, and waited. 20 seconds passed. Colonel Voss came out of the TOC. He was a deliberate man, not given to gestures or ceremony on a training day, and he walked across 40 feet of open compound at the kind of pace that made everyone on the ground stop what they were doing. He stopped in front of her. He rendered a full salute. She returned it. Nothing on her face changed. The scenario staff logged the time. 3 rooms, 3 minutes and 51 seconds. The post record had been 4 minutes and 11 seconds. It was no longer. I looked at Drummond. He was still standing at the threshold of the second room, looking at the doorway she'd come back through. He hadn't moved to the exterior. His hand was at his side. His radio was quiet. I don't know what he was thinking. I know what I was thinking, which was that I had stood 2 feet from him 6 hours earlier and agreed with him without saying a word, and that the agreement had cost me something I couldn't name yet but could feel clearly. She had no unit patch because she was a sole evaluator, certified across 3 services, 14 operational cycles, a posting that didn't belong to any single unit and therefore carried no insignia. The blank Velcro was an absence. It was the designation itself. I learned that from the compound's training officer an hour after the scenario closed, when he pulled her file at Colonel Voss's direction and read the summary to the assembled staff. 2 bronze stars with valor. The post standing CQB record, now broken by herself. Call sign Wraith 3, logged in the joint evaluation system across 6 forward installations. Drummond listened to all of it. He didn't look at her while the file was being read. He looked at the ground near the threshold of the Sector 9 block, the same doorway he'd been staring at since Colonel Voss crossed the compound. I've been in rooms where a man realizes he's wrong. Usually there's a moment where they argue the margins, find a technicality, recalibrate the story just enough to stay comfortable. Drummond didn't do any of that. He just stood there with the full weight of it and didn't try to put it down. That mattered to me. It still does. She was gone by 1100, back to whatever installation her posting sent her to next, the blank Velcro meaning something different to every compound she walked into until the file got opened. I never spoke to her directly. I watched her clear 3 rooms in 3 minutes and 51 seconds, and I watched a colonel cross 40 feet of open ground to salute her, and I watched Drummond stand at a threshold for a long time afterward, and the sum of those things is what I carry. I don't put her name in any log I write. I put the call sign. Wraith 3, top of the page, before anything else goes down, not because she asked for it, not because anyone told me to, but because the blank patch taught me something I should have known before I ever agreed with a man who hadn't opened the file.